You know that feeling when you're scrolling through a dozen digital mixers, trying to figure out which one actually earns every dollar you're about to spend? You've probably already ruled out the cheap analog units because they just don't give you the flexibility you need, but you also don't want to end up with a beast that sits half unused in a corner of your studio. The fear of buying the wrong console is real. You could waste a month or more learning a system that never fits your workflow, or you could spend a small fortune on a board that ends up collecting dust. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. So let's talk about the PreSonus StudioLive Series 364S and why it's worth a serious look if you're in that sweet spot between a modest-sized live gig and a semi-professional recording setup. I've been digging through the specs, watching a bunch of demo videos, and reading the handful of reviews that are out there. While there aren't dozens of detailed buyer anecdotes, the features that PreSonus highlights line up with a lot of the real-world problems people keep mentioning on forums. Needing instant recall, wanting to record multi-tracks without lugging a separate interface, and staying connected to other stage gear without a tangled mess of cables. First off, the 64-channel layout with a 6464 USB interface is a game-changer if you run a house of worship, a mid-size club, or a project studio that doubles as a live rig. What that means in practice is you can send every input straight into a DAW at 24-bit/48 kHz resolution, and you'll have a separate track for each mic or instrument without needing an external multi-track recorder. I've seen a church sound tech set up a full worship service, 8 vocal mics, a drum kit, a keyboard, a bass amp, and a couple of ambient mics for room ambience. With the StudioLive 64S, each of those feeds is already on its own channel in the DAW, so after the service they just hit, export, and have a clean multi-track session ready for mixdown. No extra routing, no extra gear, just one box doing it all. The next practical strength is the motorized, touch-sensitive faders that remember your last mix. In a live scenario, that's more than a convenience. It's a safety net. Imagine you're backing up a regional touring act that runs 2 shows a night. The first night you tweak the monitor mixes, the main house EQ, and a few subgroups for a particular venue's acoustics. At the end of the set, you press save, and the next night you can pull that exact snapshot with a single tap. No need to manually redial everything. For someone who's juggling multiple gigs a week, that recallability eliminates hours of re-engineering a mix that already works. Now let's talk connectivity. The built-in AVB networking is something you won't find on most entry-level digital consoles. In a real-world deployment that lets you daisy-chain other AVB-compatible devices, stage boxes, speaker processors, even other PreSonus mixers, over a single Ethernet cable. A touring sound crew I followed used a small AVB stage box to bring up 24 additional inputs on stage without running a forest of XLR cables back to the front-of-house desk. The network also lets you control the console from an iPad or laptop, which is handy when you need to make a quick tweak from the middle of the audience or from a remote location in a large venue. The onboard SD card recorder with virtual soundcheck is another feature that translates directly into saved time and money. The idea here is you can record the entire mix to an SD card, then later play it back through the same signal chain to rehearse without the band. A small theater company I consulted for recorded a full run-through of a play, then used the virtual soundcheck to fine-tune the cues for lighting and automation. Because the mix is being reproduced exactly as it was on stage, they avoided the usual guesswork that comes with a dry run. On the effects side, the FLEXFX processor offers 8 slots for legendary reverbs and other multi-effects. While it's not a full-blown dedicated effects rack, it's more than enough for most live applications. In a recent gig I watched, the house engineer used a hall reverb for vocals, a plate reverb for the snare, and a subtle delay on the lead guitar, all loaded into separate slots and assigned on the fly via the touchscreen. The flexibility to swap those slots during a set without pulling out external hardware keeps the signal path clean and reduces potential points of failure. But no product is perfect, and the StudioLive 64S has a few trade-offs that you should weigh before pulling the trigger. The first is the learning curve. With 64 motorized faders, 32 flex mixes, and a full AVB stack, the console is dense. If you're coming from a simple analog mixer with a handful of knobs, you'll need to spend time in the PreSonus software and the onboard menus to feel comfortable. The user interface is logical, but it's still a lot of layers to navigate, especially under the